And welcome on back. It's the Coin Flip Podcast. Jacob Zimmerman, Martin Kelly, James Guarantee Guerin, and we are talking about Super Bowl 57. The Kansas City Chiefs are the champs. And man, this one came down to a crucial call in the end. And I think I have an idea on where you two guys are going to go with this one. And I have an idea on where I'm going to go with this holding call that got called at the end of the game that ended up kind of deciding the Super Bowl. So, Martin, I'm going to give you the floor here on this one. Let's try to all move relatively concisely as there's three of us. So, Martin McKelly, the floor is yours on your thoughts on the holding call and the outcome of Super Bowl 57.
Well, let's start with first. Super Bowl 57 was 38-35. Final score there. The Kansas City Chiefs winning their third Super Bowl in their franchise history. Congrats to the team. I'll get this out of the way. Yes, it was the right holding call. Okay, so story after the game was everybody was kind of getting up in arms about the holding call and why would you call it? Well, for a couple reasons. One, it was the right call. Two, it was the backline judge who got the sight of the holding call. It wasn't the sideline judge. So let's get that one straight. And then three, everyone's talking about how Mahomes threw it about 10, 15 yards ahead, and where he was like, well, it was overthrown, it was out of reach, it wasn't really supposed to be a holding call. He saw the backline judge throw the flag, and hence why he threw it away like that, because he was like, all right, we're already going to get the call. We're already going to get a holding. I'm all good. Just got to throw this away. I think the fact is the holding call is just an excuse to cover up the fact that the Eagles failed to score any points in this second half. They scored a total of 24 points in that first half. And in the second half, they only score a total of 11 points in that second half after scoring 24 points. I think the fact is Kansas City bought their time. Philadelphia bit more off than they can chew. When you got two field goal drives and a punt and you cost yourselves that many points off the board, you're going to ask for playing with fire. And I think Philly's using the holding call as a reason to kind of get away from the fact that their defense failed in the second half, their offense failed in the second half. They didn't really play particularly too well in that second half. I keep emphasizing the second half because that was really the end of the game. That decided the game. If they don't kick two field goals and get two touchdowns and don't punt the ball, that's three touchdowns they could have had back. They could have won this game 49-38. That should be the final score instead of 38-35. I just think the holding call is an excuse. I think Kansas City won this game outright, and I think Philadelphia threw this game away.
James Guerin, let's go to you on your concise thoughts on the holding call at the end of Super Bowl 57.
This is a very controversial topic. I agreed with the call 100% because James Bradbury had impeded Juju Smith-Schuster from running his route. Now, people want to say, "Oh, well, it was within 5 yards. It was within 5 yards," and it was within 5 yards. But if you take a closer look at it, it's not the first time that Juju runs into James Bradbury. It's when he's trying to break off on a wheel route towards the end zone, where his hand goes around his hip, and that's going to get called 10 out of 10 times in every situation, first, second, third, fourth down. It just is. And in that situation, on that play, in that moment, that for Patrick Mahomes, that's going to get called every single time.
Wow.
And for some reason, everyone wants to have this huge argument about, oh, well, it wasn't holding. It's like if you're trying to run a route and the defender is preventing you from doing that, you're being held. And if you're not being held, it's illegal contact. But his hand was wrapped around the guy's hip, around Juju's hip. So I agreed with the call 100%. Because if it was Tom Brady driving down, that flag is still being thrown. So it doesn't matter. They got the flag that they needed to get, and it ultimately changed the game because now if that flag isn't thrown, you're kicking a field goal. Philadelphia's got over a minute now to go down and try and win this game. So it was a huge, huge flag for that ref to throw it, but it was the correct call. So I agree with it.
All right, Martin, James. The heat in this room has just been turned up a notch. At the end of the day, here's the deal. I know that now this doesn't really have to do with my point, but neither one of you has played a single down, maybe a practice snap in your life of defensive back in football. Maybe in organized football or just out in the parking lot or whatever. So let's go.
I was
Let's take a
scout
look at this.
team
I'm looking at
corner in
this
high
clip. So
school.
James, you said it was the second kind of touch by Bradbury that impeded his motion. If anything, it's the first touch that impedes his motion. That's where he's doing the quick cut with the
Right, but
acute angle
it's
in and
when he
then
breaks back out. It's when he
turning right out.
breaks back
When
out.
when he first cuts out, that's the first slight contact you can say
And
is
that's legal. And that's
it,
legal.
and that is legal right there. When he cuts up, that doesn't impede Juju Smith-Schuster.
It wasn't his
He's still gaining his speed.
it
He's
wasn't his right hip he grabbed. It was his left hip,
Yeah,
which
that's
completely turns him.
all right.
turns him.
It turns him. If Juju was running right and he's trying to cut up, you obviously have to pivot
No,
with your right foot.
he no
Yes?
he. At the end of the day, James, this is a ticky-tack call. This is a 50-50 call, if best, and you're going to make it to decide the Super Bowl.
Here's the thing.
That's it. To
If
decide the Super Bowl. A
if
50, a
Mahomes
50-50 call, if that. And I just don't think that's enough. These are NFL athletes. They're supposed to have a little bit of touch. Imagine someone like Ray Lewis or any defensive back who played in the early 2000s or before then seeing this called a penalty. They're going to lose their absolute mind. I mean, I had to guard in practice in high school every day. I had to guard a wide receiver who ended up making the list, according to Max Preps, as one of the 20 best high school receivers of the last 20 years. That was never going to get called a personal foul in practice, even against him. That's not a penalty,
if
especially that
Mahomes
low.
had thrown the ball to any other receiver, that is not a flag. But he ended up throwing it to Juju anyway. And because
And he
Mahomes
threw it 10
overthrew
yards
him,
over his head.
you had to sell it. Like, are we not giving any credit to the Chiefs' IQ here? That's a smart veteran play by Juju to be aware of that. I mean,
Sell
that's just
what?
a smart
Sell
football
what?
play.
No, he took a
Mahomes had
terrible
to
cut. He didn't spin him in. He took a terrible cut up the field.
because
He was
Mahomes
supposed to
cut
go to the
back left.
corner of the end zone. He was supposed to go to the pylon where Mahomes threw the ball. Instead, he cut straight up the field. You think he got turned? It's because he took a horrible cut. That's why it was called a penalty.
I'm gonna look at it in real time. Keep going.
Anyway,
All right, let me jump back into this. All right. To go off your points, James, is one, like I said, the backline judge threw this. The backline judge standing behind the goal line, the guy that's standing next to the goalpost threw this. So he saw Bradbury's hand come on that left hip, and saw, okay,
he's the
that's
one who
enough.
didn't have the greatest angle, though. If you
So the
wanted a good
backline
angle, you should have the side judge see that on the sideline, because the back judge isn't going to actually see how much Juju gets moved off of that.
The backline judge is the perfect judge to see that because the backline judge is looking towards the corner and looking towards the wide receivers they're breaking off. The sideline judge isn't looking at the wide receiver. The sideline judge is looking at the offensive line, determining whether someone jumped off sides or not. He's paying
Perhaps a
more.
better question we should be asking ourselves is why can a flag not be reviewed as well?
Oh, we're
That is a
going
good
back.
question, and I wish it was.
In in
No.
in
Okay, wait,
playoff,
wait,
you're
wait, wait.
telling me in playoff games they can't stop. I mean, think about all the gazillion ads they already run in these games that take 5 minutes for damn commercial breaks. You're telling me they can't load up the jumbotron or call into a referee who's in the booth and look at the monitor already and get an official word and review it on what the actual call is in the freaking Super Bowl in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes left?
Yes, because I'll tell you right now why your argument is invalid. Go back to I had an argument with James about this on his show back in the day after the Saints and the Rams non pass interference got called in the NFC Championship game. Okay. Let's go back to that moment real quick. New Orleans had a chance to run out that clock, waste the Rams' last two timeouts, kick a field goal, and force the Rams to play catch up with trying to get down the field with no timeouts and try to tie the game. That's the same scenario. What happened the next season when pass interference were reviewable? There was not one pass interference that got overturned by any of the officials. The officials were insulted by the fact that they were getting judged on their own calls on the field. Is
And
that
that's a
right?
that's a
Yes.
problem. That's an NFL problem.
It is a problem, but the officials are not going to get together and say that they called the wrong call when they're already being judged so much. So in this situation, it's not going to happen again. If we review
Fans would
every
forgive
little,
him if they made the right call and fixed it.
okay, but the point is the holding call is an excuse for the Eagles because they failed to score points. That's my point. Like we can't forget the fact that they
They
only
put up
put up 11.
35. The defense failed
Whoa,
because
whoa,
they
wait, wait.
they had a crappy turf on the field that you could have no grip with your cleats on that cost the Eagles a couple of sacks or two.
I just want to point something out. I'm watching the play again. Juju Smith came in motion, ran a button route. He ran a button route, is what he did. And then as he was turning around, Bradbury had his left hand on his left hip. You can't do that. That if he didn't put his hand on his left hip for the official to see, that would have not have been a flag.
James, as a defensive back,
You can keep
you
up
were
with the
taught
receiver
to
without grabbing him.
you were
You just
taught
can't.
to
He had the angle
put your
on him.
hand on their hip, and that is legal. You
Yeah,
can
but not
do that.
grab it. Not grab it.
He didn't grab. If he grabbed it, you would have seen the jersey get pulled. There was no.
I'm looking at it right now, dude. He did.
And now, in the Coin Flip podcast, we're going to move on to our next segment. This one, perhaps the inspiration for today's episode, is I wanted to hear what everybody had to say on this. But the question is Patrick Mahomes already a top 3 quarterback of all time? Does he eclipse one of the names of the following? Does he surpass Tom Brady? Does he surpass Joe Montana? Does he surpass Peyton Manning? Those, I think, are probably everybody's top 3 quarterbacks of all time, or at least they should. So, guys, I will give you the floor. James, will have you start this one off first. And I want to hear what you have to say about this one. Because I know you are a strong, strong fan of. Is it Tom Brady you're a strong fan of? Remind me.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the guy to death. He's my favorite player ever. Oh my goodness. Um, if you were to ask me, is Patrick Mahomes a top 3 player of all time at 27 years old? I would say yes, 100%. But that's not the question. The question is he a top 3 quarterback all time? And because that's the question, I'm just going to say no. Now, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have the potential to get there because he 100% absolutely is on track to be a top 3 quarterback all time. wins, stats, whatever. If he keeps going at this pace, he'll eventually get there. But however, he does join an elite group of quarterbacks to have 2 MVPs and 2 Super Bowl MVPs, and that list is Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Joe Montana. So he's right up there with those 3 guys, but he's not quite there yet just because he hasn't played as long, and that's simple as that. If he were to retire tomorrow, you could make your argument that 100% he's a Hall of Famer at this point. But
James, are you saying that Patrick Mahomes could retire and down the line that he might surpass Peyton Manning, your favorite player ever? Are you saying Patrick Mahomes could surpass him?
Patrick Mahomes has one first-team All-Pro. And I think when you look at individual success, you look at the All-Pro selections. Nobody cares about Pro Bowls anymore. It's a joke. That's not even like something to be proud of at this point. You look at All-Pro selections. Mahomes has one, all right? And that's whatever. That's good. He had this 50-touchdown year. Peyton Manning had 7 first-team All-Pro selections.
You know he's going to get a second one here, right?
I don't think he's going to get it this year.
He's MVP.
Yeah, but I don't know.
He's MVP. Okay, if you're an MVP and you don't make, how are you the MVP of the National Football League and you don't make first team?
It's different voters. It's different people that make the list. It's not the same people. It's not the same people. People who vote MVP are not the ones that make the all pro teams. But anyway, so say he does get a second one. He still has 5 more to catch up to Peyton Manning. Tom Brady only has 3 first-team All-Pros. So Mahomes could be right behind him in that aspect alone. And I'm just talking about individual success. We can talk about team success all we want, but we're talking about just the individual player himself. And Mahomes, he's going to get the yards. He's probably, if he keeps going, he'll pass Peyton Manning in passing yards, passing touchdowns. You know, he's going to get there as well. But to say right now that he's a top 3 quarterback, I just don't know, because there's some people out there that would even put John Elway.
But James,
above.
I want you to answer kind of what I just asked you though. Do you think Patrick Mahomes will pass Peyton Manning?
I think he will.
You think he will?
I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of, though. You know, like it took Peyton 18 years to get 2 rings, and here we are, 5 years in with Mahomes, and 6 years in, and he's already got 2, with 2 MVPs and 2 Super Bowl MVPs to go along with it. So, you know, there's no reason why he shouldn't pass Peyton Manning, to make that more clear.
Now, James, this is an interesting topic here. Because when we look at Peyton Manning, I think the only thing that is holding him above Mahomes in most people's eyes is the longevity, correct?
What do you mean?
It's that he's had a full career so far, right?
Sure.
Well, and the main thing is everybody looks at the 2 championships, right?
Mm-hmm.
In both of Patrick Mahomes' championships, he was unquestioned the best player on the field and the best player in the world that season for both of them. Peyton Manning's second Super Bowl ring, was that the case?
No, he got carried his last season. And I'm sure he'd be the first person to tell you that.
And when we look at, how great Peyton Manning was in the regular season, I mean, Peyton Manning is the greatest regular season quarterback there's ever been.
Hey, he's got 5 MVPs.
Mahomes
Aaron Rodgers
didn't
has
even
4
touch
now.
that regular season.
He could.
I don't think Patrick Mahomes will get to 5 MVPs because I don't think the voters are gonna. I think it's a different day and age. I think with social media, it's a different day and age. They're not going to give him the
All it
The
takes
vote
is a
of fatigue is
flashy
real.
player like Lamar Jackson to win MVP.
Yeah,
I know what you're
it's gonna be
saying.
a new guy. It's gonna be Jalen Hurts next year. It's gonna be a new guy. Joe Burrow. I mean, I think that also bleeds into the All Pro thing as well that you were mentioning. So, I mean, it's tough to say because I am not the same level of Peyton Manning fan that you are. But Peyton Manning was one of my favorite players growing up as well. In Madden, in real life, I mean, dude's a hilarious guy. But I almost have to say Peyton Manning is 3A and Patrick Mahomes is 3B right now. They're
It's
tied at
fair.
the
It's
moment.
fair.
Because, I mean,
If you take the postseason out of it,
the fact that
are you still agreeing with
I
that?
still think that people are not talking enough about how they traded Tyreek Hill and legitimately people who cover the NFL and players really thought the Chiefs were not even going to win the division.
Yeah.
And they win the Super Bowl. They won the Super Bowl with Kadarius Toney, who was what was he cut from the Giants, traded from the Giants? I mean,
Traded.
practically the same thing. Juju Smith-Schuster, TikTok boy, according to AJ Brown. Uh, Basically, Jerick McKinnon, who nobody heard of, and I guarantee if he went to a different team, he wouldn't be a fantasy pop-off. He wouldn't be doing that. But the three-headed monster of Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, and Andy Reid is unstoppable. And I think that Travis Kelce and Gronkowski prove that if you had to choose, James, between if you could have a top two, let's say top two, wide receiver in the league or tight end in the league, would you rather have a top two tight end in the league or receiver in the league? And you tell me which position, at their best, is more valuable.
I'd have to go with the tight end. Are you talking about
Exactly.
like this year? This year.
You guys are nuts.
Are you talking about this year or are you talking about just in general?
I'm saying going forward in today's day and age, having a tight end, having a guy like Mark Andrews with an elite quarterback behind him, having a guy like Travis Kelce with a good quarterback behind him, throw George Kittle when he's absolutely healthy in there at the mix, and that's probably more productive, more valuable in a playoff game than having I mean, we just saw Devontae Adams this year. Cooper Kupp might be the only exception to me on that list, but anyway, we're kind of going off topic. I think Patrick Mahomes at this current moment is probably tied with Peyton Manning, even though Manning has the longevity. I think Mahomes, um, I almost want to say kind of sneakily, kind of quietly, has carried the Chiefs, and the fact that, I mean, I myself, we can go listen back to other podcasts. I was doubting the Chiefs. I had the Bills or whatever. I thought it was their year. Completely wrong. Mahomes is the new guarantee in the NFL.
Okay, so
Martin, let's go to you.
I'll be the objective one here, considering there's a little bit of I'm hearing a little biasy from both of them. Obviously, I would expect that from James when it comes to Peyton Manning, and
What bias
obviously,
do I have?
no,
I
you
had money on the
sounded
Eagles.
I mean, you were trying to like antagonize James the entire time. I'll give you credit; it's funny as hell. Anyway, um, here's my point on all of this: is Patrick Mahomes a top three quarterback of all time? No, that's a simple no.
Where is he
The
right
ma-
now for you, though?
he's 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 about 6 or 7 on the list.
Okay,
He's
okay.
I'm throwing out championships. I'm throwing all those out the window. Let's just break it down in the sense of quarterbacks. He's not ahead of Brady. He's not ahead of Manny. He's not ahead
Here,
of Montana.
I'm glad you thought of that, Martin. I'm gonna pull up a list, and we're gonna go through. We can do this together. We can get James's thoughts on this as well. Let's put out a
Let me
top 10
go.
quarterback list, and let's go through each guy, and let's say, would you rank Patrick Mahomes or this guy higher?
You're gonna let Martin finish, right?
Go ahead, Martin. Go ahead, Martin.
So is he better than Drew Brees? That's a coin flip. Is he better than John Elway? That's a coin flip. Is he better than Dan Marino? That's a coin flip. He is better than Ben Roethlisberger. He is better than Otto Graham. He's better than Johnny Unitas. He's better
Did you say it
than
was a
both.
coin flip with Drew Brees?
When it comes to arm talent, when it comes to playmaking, yeah,
When it
it's a
comes to
tie
all
between.
time, when it comes to all time ranking, you think?
Yeah, yes.
How could you say Drew Brees is? How could you say Drew Brees is tied all time with Mahomes right now
Did
because
you
of his
not
total
see?
yards?
Yes, the total yards and the success that Drew Brees did have offensively with the Saints. I mean, let's not sugarcoat it and let's make it seem like the Saints were a 9-7 team every damn year. They had some really damn good offenses
What
under
about
Sean
Aaron
Payton and
Rodgers,
Aaron
Martin?
Rodgers and Drew and Brett Favre. I was getting to that. When it comes to that, he is better than both of those guys. That's not even a question in my mind. And obviously, Aaron Rodgers is the 4-time MVP, and Brett Favre is a back-to-back MVP in 96 and 97. So I think in those respects, yeah, I think Patrick Mahomes is better than those guys. If you want to add rings, if you want to add all pros and Pro Bowls, yes, he's ahead of Drew Brees. Yes, he's ahead of Big Ben Roethlisberger. He's ahead of Dan Marino. He's ahead of Johnny. He's ahead of Otto. He's ahead of a litany of quarterbacks.
Otto Graham's got 7 first-team All-Pros. All
Martin,
right,
with
let's
all the
not
names
forget
that you
that.
just said, I mean, I think you just said that Mahomes is top five based off of everybody that you just crossed out.
He is borderline top five, and yes, you're right, James. 7 All Pros for Otto Graham because he was a badass back in the day with those Cleveland Brown teams.
Martin, if they had
Gotta
leather
get
helmets, I'm not counting it.
What?
what? First of all, okay, I would expect that
In
from
the top
James, but
So
in the
Jim
comes
top
to
Brown's
five,
you,
irrelevant?
in the top five, no, not in the top
Otto
five.
Graham, are you nuts? Yes. What are you talking about, dude? Seriously,
We're
go
Can't
not
back and
putting a
look at
disrespect
those
leatherhead in the top
films.
five.
three-time MVP Johnny Unitas either.
We're not putting
Which that
Johnny Unitas in the top
that
five.
record
I'm
stood
sorry.
for like 35 years. You know that, right?
Seriously. Johnny Unitas is the only reason why the Baltimore Colts were relevant at some point.
Hey. They still went 11-1 and won a Super Bowl without him.
Ah.
Anyway,
Anyway, the point on all of it is Patrick Mahomes, if you really had to put a list together, he's probably 6 or 7 all time right now. He's not ahead of Brady. He's not ahead of Manny. He's not ahead of Montana. He's. I wouldn't put him ahead of Steve
And
Young, and I wouldn't.
you just got stuck right there. So there it is.
I,
Martin
hey,
has Patrick Mahomes at number
did you
four.
just say he's not above Steve Young?
yeah, because Steve Young's got 3 rings. Steve Young
2
earned
as
three
a
rings.
backup?
What?
That's like Jimmy
Well, that's being a
Garoppolo.
backup. He
That's
did earn
Jimmy
94.
Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo has 2 rings. Does he deserve any credit for those?
He
No.
had Jerry
Steve
Rice.
Young doesn't
He had
either.
Jerry freaking Rice, dude. Come on.
Hey, I just actually was hanging out with a Niners fan over the weekend, and I looked it up. Steve Young was 1-5 in NFC Championship games. That's better than Mahomes.
That's
That's
Mahomes doesn't have a winning
that's
record in
wretched.
the NFC Championship games
Stop it.
either.
He's not better than freaking Steve Young is not better than Mahomes. I'm sorry. That is far fetched.
all right. I think it's time we move on to our final discussion here. The Eagles and their future. Boys, we know about the Super Bowl hangover. Jalen Hurts, though, is an up and coming young gun who's really proved himself. Let's go to you again, James. Let's hear what you have to say on the Eagles for next season and maybe the next couple of seasons going forward. What do you think of the Eagles' chances on winning a Super Bowl or getting back?
Well, I think the NFC curse is a real thing. The NFC East, not winning back-to-back years. It's gonna happen again. Dallas is gonna win the division. Philly is gonna take a step back. They lost their offensive coordinator. He's now my head coach for the Indianapolis Colts. And then just a couple hours ago, the Arizona Cardinals took their defensive coordinator as well to be their new head coach.
Great
So
points.
they're losing everybody at the most important positions other than the head coach, obviously. So filling in those roles, trying to keep the same momentum that they had all season long is going to be difficult. I do expect a Super Bowl hangover to hit, not like the Rams because they didn't strategize their season like how the Rams did. But I do think now this can go one or two ways for Jalen Hurts specifically. He can either take this, learn from it, and grow from it, or it's going to bother him. And I've been saying this all postseason long. The Eagles ran on emotion, and when things go well for them, they do really well. But when they struggle, yeah, it's kind of rocky. And we saw that a few times throughout the season, the three games that they did lose. I won't even really count the Gardner Minshew games, but the one that they did lose to Washington, it just the whole atmosphere of the Eagles sideline. I remember watching that game, and it was just like, they do not have their swagger. And and the Eagles had that in the first half of the Super Bowl, and then they kind of lost it a little bit in the second half. So I do expect them to decline a little bit. I'm not saying they're going to win 9 games, but I could see them, 10, 11 games, still be competitive, still be, a threat. But I do think that losing both of your coordinators is definitely a bigger issue than people realize. So, they're not going to be the
Yes.
Rams, but they're not going to be the number one seed in the NFC again.
James, I think it's more likely that they do become the Rams than they go back to the Super Bowl. You mentioned the NFC East curse, James. It's really a whole NFC thing entirely. There's a reason that there's really it's practically just a random team every year from the NFC, and it really goes to show how hard it is in the NFL. Repeating postseason success in the National Football League is harder than any of the other major four American sports by far, because of how much work gets put into play calling and film study and all of these things, the details of the game, XYZ, the schemes. And you mentioned the coordinator's gone. I think that's really going to hurt him as well. I mean, seeing what happened with my Panthers, them being really good, and then falling off the face of the earth. The Falcons, same thing happened to them the very next year. I mean, that's happened kind of with the Seahawks there. Every team in the NFC comes and they go. And it's like each team kind of peaks for one season and then they're done. And honestly, even with Jalen Hurts being a really good quarterback, there's a chance that this is the best season we're ever going to see from Jalen Hurts.
I think, and we all know how much the Eagles run Jalen Hurts. I think that if they continue to use him as
Great
much
point.
as they do, he's going to get hurt. And he missed a couple of games this year because of that. So if they don't fix that, because you can't rely on that, we saw Lamar back to back seasons now has missed 5 games because of his play style. It
Cam
doesn't
Newton.
work. It doesn't work in the NFL. So I just I don't know. It's going to be really complicated to replicate what they
And he's
did.
about to get paid and take up all that cap.
Well, I think he's got one more year. I think he's got one more. But the year after that would definitely have to be the year they get paid. But to have the number one pass defense in the league and the number one team in sacks, that's just super hard to replicate. To have the third most sacks all time in a season behind Martin's 84 and 85 Bears, to try and do that again is just, it's unheard of. So,
They need the linemen to stay there. They need all the linemen to stay.
yeah,
If they can
Hassan
do
Reddick,
that, they might not be the Rams, but I mean, I think it's a better chance of a new up and coming team next year that pops out of nowhere that then makes the Super Bowl better than the Eagles.
Yeah, you're right about the NFC being it is a new team every year. I was looking at the NFC like host games, and it is a new team every single year. And throughout the entire history of the NFL, the Kansas City Chiefs now have the longest consecutive uh, home championship games with five. They've been the number one seed 5 years in a row. And you know who has the second longest streak of all time? The Philadelphia Eagles when Andy Reid was there. They went 3 straight years as the number one seed. So Andy Reid gets
And
some
I
credit for
guess
this too.
I guess we can go back. I mean, quickly going back to the Mahomes Manning thing. I mean, I guess that's why Mahomes is tied with Manning at this point for me already because every single year of him starting, they've had the best record in the toughest conference and made it to at least the championship game. I mean, damn.
Yeah, no, it is impressive when you look at it from that perspective. But when you talk about when you look at success as a team, Peyton Manning never had a coach like Andy Reid. I mean, Andy Reid is a magician, one of the best play callers, play designers that this league has ever seen. So that
But
helps
he did have
with.
I don't know, with Dallas Clark, Reggie Wayne, and Marvin
Well, sure,
Harrison,
he had a bunch of
Joseph
Hall of
Addai,
Famers with him and a bunch of great
Dwight
players around
Freeney,
him. That's
Mathis, Bob Sanders.
yeah. You can keep going. I mean, those guys were all legends, but it just goes to show how great Mahomes is, and but it's not yet. He's not top three yet. Now he's looking through the window, he's tapping on the glass, but he's not in there yet. So
Martin, let's give you your opportunity to sound off before we wrap up this podcast on how you think the Eagles are going to do going forward, and as well as Jalen Hurts.
Oh, it's my turn to talk. I appreciate that. I'm just giving y'all shit. Anyway, um,
Sorry.
no, it's all right. I'm just giving y'all crap. I think the same thing when it comes to the Rams. I think they'll have that big of a drop off. Um, to James's points with the 5 straight AFC Championship games for Kansas City. You're right. 3 of those were for Philly was number one seed. They did go to 4 straight. I think if I'm right, I think the one against Carol. I know the one in Carolina that was in Philly, and I know the one against Tampa that was in Philly too. There was another one I forget where that one was at too. Anyway, point is, actually no, that was against the Rams in 2000.
Your point,
So
Martin.
yeah, my point is Eagles are going to fall off not because them losing their coordinators. They're going to fall off because of their players. We don't know how much longer Graham has. We don't know how much longer Lane Johnson has. We don't know how much longer Jason Kelsey has. They're trying to keep Gardner Johnson. They don't know if they'll be able to keep him. The reports of Jalen Hurts wanting $50 million a year. I think it's a little bit over exaggeration because Hurts hasn't won an MVP. Hurts hasn't been a true long term success story, unlike Patrick Mahomes, who's, I mean, in 6 seasons in the NFL, 5 straight AFC Championship games. That's damn impressive. Not a whole lot of quarterbacks can say that. I just think Philly's gonna eat up, the fact that they're gonna have to deal with players leaving and players getting injured. And I mean, yes, they have a stellar offense. Yes, they have Miles Sanders, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown. They have, all that talent right there. Jalen Hurts. They have talent on the offensive line. Maybe they can replace Jalen and Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson quicker than we all think. But defensively, it might take a step back because they lost their defensive coordinator. But Haynes brings up a good point in the fact that they did have a few games this season where they struggled. I mean, they did at one point struggle against Jacksonville. They had to come back and win that game. They did struggle against Houston on a Thursday night game all the way until halftime. They did struggle against the Green Bay Packers late in that game, even with Aaron Rodgers out of that game. They did struggle against the Cowboys and they gave up 40 points to the Cowboys. So there were times where the Eagles looked like they were punching above their weight, and and fortunate it was the Minnesota Vikings labeled as they were punching over their weight, not the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll see what teams come out of the NFC next year. I don't think there's going to be too much of a change just because the NFC is not as strong as the AFC. I think you really look at it, the NFC East, the Niners, and that's about it. That's probably your best, legitimate. If you're looking at it throughout the entire NFC conference, those are your probably five best teams by default. Because NFC South is still a rebuilding division. Besides the Packers and the Vikings in the NFC North, that's really it. I mean, yeah, the Bears and the Lions are interesting, but other than that, the NFC is not that good. So I think the Eagles won't be too much of a drop off. I think they'll still make the playoffs, but I don't think they'll be what they were last year.
And that is the Coin Flip Podcast once again. Jacob Zimmerman, James Guarantee Guerin, and Martin Kelly.
Later.